His bed was a park bench. His meals were uncertain, and hope felt like a distant memory. One cold morning, a billionaire stepped out of his shining car, looked at him with pity, and mocked him for being poor. But fate was listening, because just hours later, that same man who had nothing found something that would change everything. A forgotten lottery ticket, worth more than he could ever imagine. Prepare to witness a powerful transformation, how a single act of arrogance led to a miracle, and how a homeless man's heart proved richer than all the money in the world. Gray light filtered through the city haze and the streets were still half asleep. The rumble of buses mixed with the rustle of paper cups rolling across the sidewalk. John sat on his usual bench by the corner store, shoulders hunched against the cold. His coat had seen better years, many of them, and his hands were rough from too many winters outside. But he greeted the morning like he always did, with a quiet nod to the sky and a whisper only he could hear. "Still here," he'd say. Still breathing. Every day followed the same rhythm. He'd walk a few blocks to the soup kitchen, share stories with the other regulars, maybe sweep the walkway for a few coins. Some days were good. Some days just survivable. That morning, the wind carried the sharp smell of roasted coffee from the cafe across the street. People hurried by in pressed coats, faces glued to their phones. John noticed one man in particular, a tall figure stepping out of a sleek black car that gleamed like liquid night. The man's suit looked like it cost more than everything John owned in his life. He barked into his phone, laughed loudly, then glanced toward John. Their eyes met for half a second. The man smirked. Then, with a shake of his head, he tossed a crumpled dollar bill into the gutter. "Here, buddy," he said. "Buy yourself a dream." Laughter echoed as he walked away. John didn't answer. He just watched the dollar flutter against the curb, caught between oil stains and broken glass. He wasn't angry. Not anymore. When you've been invisible long enough, even mockery feels like proof you exist. He reached down for the bill, brushing aside a handful of trash. That's when he saw it, half tucked under a coffee cup, rain-spotted and faded. A lottery ticket. It looked worthless, torn on one edge, the print almost smudged. Still, he picked it up, turning it over between his fingers. He chuckled softly. "A dream, huh?" he murmured. Maybe he was right. He slipped it into his pocket beside the dollar. Didn't think much of it after that. The day passed slowly. He helped an older woman carry her groceries, got a sandwich from a kind stranger, found a dry spot near the bus stop to rest. When dusk settled, neon signs blinked to life, washing the street in soft red and blue light. John pulled the ticket out again, curious now. He wandered to the small convenience store where the clerk sometimes let him warm his hands near the heater. The man behind the counter smiled. "Back again, John? You bringing me luck this time?" John grinned. "Maybe. Found this thing on the street." "Probably trash." The clerk took it, squinting at the numbers. "Hold on," he said, reaching for his phone. "They just drew the winners last night." John leaned closer. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Then the clerk froze. "John," he whispered, eyes wide. "These numbers, these are the ones." John frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean this ticket," the clerk said, holding it carefully as if it might burn his hands, "is the winning ticket." The world went quiet. The sounds of traffic, footsteps, even the soft buzz of the lights, all of it faded. John stared at the paper, the torn edge trembling between his fingers. "That can't be," he said. "You're joking." The clerk shook his head. "I'm not. I swear, these are the winning numbers." John's knees felt weak. He sank onto the stool beside the counter. A laugh escaped his throat. Half disbelief, half fear. "A ticket in the trash," he muttered. "And now—" He couldn't finish the sentence. The clerk smiled slowly. "Guess you just bought yourself a dream after all." Outside, the night deepened and the streetlights blinked on one by one. John stepped out of the store clutching the ticket, heart pounding, breath coming fast. He looked around. The same cracked sidewalks, the same hum of traffic, the same world that had never really seen him. Only now, everything felt different. Somewhere in the distance, a limousine roared past. The same kind of car that billionaire had stepped out of that morning. John watched its taillights vanish into the night and whispered to himself, "Let's see who's laughing now." The night air felt heavier than usual. John stood outside the convenience store, staring at the small slip of paper in his trembling hands. The city around him buzzed like a living thing. Neon lights flickering, cars hissing by, laughter spilling from a nearby bar. But to him, it all sounded distant. That ticket was no longer just paper. It was power. It was possibility. And it terrified him. He slipped it deep into his coat pocket, zipped it shut, and started walking fast. Every person who passed suddenly looked suspicious. What if someone saw him? What if they knew? He'd spent years being invisible. Now, for the first time, he felt exposed. He found a quiet alley near the old library where he sometimes slept, tucked between dumpsters and warm air vents. There, under the faint orange glow of a broken streetlight, he pulled the ticket out again. He read the numbers over and over, whispering them like a prayer. 3, 7, 11, 21, 32, and the Powerball. 6. His voice cracked. He'd heard those same numbers earlier that night on a radio someone had left playing outside the store. It was real. It couldn't be. But it was. He laughed softly, then stopped himself. What if someone heard? He folded the ticket carefully, slid it into a torn envelope, and tucked it inside his boot. For the rest of the night, he didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the cold wall, eyes half closed, heart pounding to a rhythm that wouldn't slow down. When dawn came, the city woke with its usual chaos. Buses growling, horns honking, pigeons arguing over crumbs. John stood, stretched his aching back, and whispered, "Okay, let's find out what comes next." The next morning, he walked to a nearby cafe and waited outside until one of the regulars finished reading his paper. When the man tossed it into the trash, John fished it out and scanned the front page. The winning lottery numbers were printed in bold black ink. They matched. Exactly. His stomach flipped. Below the numbers was a headline. Record jackpot claimed. Winner yet unknown. He folded the paper tight against his chest. It felt unreal, like a dream he didn't want to wake from. "Record jackpot," he murmured. "How much we talking, John boy?" He found the number. $112 million. For a moment he couldn't breathe. That much money, it was bigger than anything he could even picture. He could buy a house, 100 houses. He could eat warm meals, wear clean clothes, sleep in a bed again. But first, he had to make it count. He had to find out how to claim it. And for that, he needed help. The right kind. Later that afternoon, John walked back to the same store. The clerk, a kind man named Ravi, looked up from behind the counter. "You okay, John? You disappeared last night like a ghost." John grinned nervously. "Still trying to believe it," Ravi chuckled. "You and me both. You want me to check again? Just to be sure." John nodded. Ravi fed the ticket into the scanner. The machine beeped once, then again, sharper this time. The screen flashed red. "Winning ticket. Contact State Lottery Office." Ravi exhaled slowly. "It's official." "You're the man." John's mouth went dry. He looked at the words, half in awe, half in fear. "What do I even do now?" he whispered. Ravi leaned closer. "You don't tell anyone, not yet. You go straight to the lottery office tomorrow morning. I'll help you get there." John hesitated. "What if they don't believe me?" "Look at me." Ravi's eyes softened. "Money doesn't care what you look like, my friend. You earned this just by picking it up." That night, John couldn't stop replaying the billionaire's smirk in his mind. The cruel toss of the dollar, the mocking tone. He imagined walking up to that man now, holding the ticket between his fingers and saying nothing, just smiling. He didn't want revenge. Not really. But the thought of balance, of justice. It warmed him more than the city's chill ever could. He slept inside a shelter that night for safety, keeping the ticket inside his boot, one hand resting over it as he drifted into restless dreams. In one dream, he was sitting at a long dinner table under crystal chandeliers. The billionaire was there too, still laughing, until John laid the winning ticket on the table. Then silence. Just the sound of John's voice saying softly, "Some things you can't buy." The next morning, the sun broke through the clouds. John stood outside the state lottery office, heart hammering like a drum. He looked up at the tall glass doors, his reflection barely visible in the shiny surface. He took a deep breath. "This is it," he whispered. The guard by the door frowned when he approached. "Sir, the office isn't open to the public right now." John held up the envelope. I think I have a winning ticket." The guard blinked, then gestured for him to wait. A few minutes later, a woman in a gray suit appeared. "Sir, if you'll come with me," she said politely, though her eyes were cautious. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and polished floors. John felt every eye on him as he followed her to a small office. She took the ticket carefully, examined it, and typed something into her computer. A soft tone chimed, then she looked up and smiled. "Congratulations, Mr. "Just John," he said quietly. "Congratulations, John. You are now $112 million richer." He stared at her, the words sinking in like sunlight through fog. A laugh, shaky, disbelieving, escaped his lips. "Ma'am," he said softly, "I don't think I've been rich a single day in my life." She smiled. "You are now." And for the first time in years, John felt something he hadn't dared to feel in a long time. Hope. For 3 days, John could hardly breathe without checking his pocket. Even though the lottery office had confirmed everything, even though the woman had handed him a folder full of forms and advice, he still woke up each morning afraid it had all been a dream. He stayed at a small shelter near downtown, keeping to himself. The official check wouldn't be released for another week, the woman had said, while they verified his identity. She'd helped him fill out temporary documents, things he hadn't had in years. Each form felt like a piece of himself returning from the shadows. When he saw his name typed neatly on a new state ID, he almost cried. John Merrick. It had been so long since he'd seen his own name printed on anything official. The news had spread fast. "Homeless man wins $112 million jackpot," read the morning headline on the paper Ravi slid across the counter. John's photo, blurry and awkward, sat just beneath it. "You're famous now," Ravi said with a grin. John chuckled softly. That's the scary part. He'd asked for privacy, but nothing in the world could hide a story like that. Reporters camped outside the shelter. Cameras flashed when he stepped out for air. Some people cheered, others stared, half curious, half doubtful. The billionaire's face flashed on one of the TV screens in a store window. He was giving an interview about charitable giving at a fundraiser downtown. John paused for a moment, watching the man's perfect smile. "Charity," he murmured. "Funny word, that." Then he turned and walked away. When the day finally came to claim the check, John wore the best clothes he could find. A donated blazer, slightly too big, and clean jeans. Ravi insisted on driving him there. The ride was silent except for the hum of the tires and the sound of John's nervous tapping on his knee. At the lottery office, they handed him a folder. Inside was a cashier's check. Crisp, heavy, almost unreal. He stared at it, heart thudding. "So, this is what a miracle looks like on paper," he whispered. The woman smiled. "This is your new beginning, John. Spend it wisely." He nodded slowly. "Oh, I will." That night, John didn't go back to the shelter. He walked the streets instead, the same streets he'd slept on for years. But everything looked different now. The streetlights brighter, the sidewalks somehow cleaner, the air lighter in his lungs. He passed his old bench near the corner store and sat down. The wood creaked beneath him, familiar and comforting. He closed his eyes and whispered, "You still here, John. Still breathing." The same words he'd said every morning for years. Only now they felt different. He wasn't just surviving, he was beginning again. Over the next few weeks, he rented a small apartment. Nothing fancy, just quiet and warm. He bought a bed, a coffee maker, and a tiny TV that flickered with local news. He spent hours standing at the window, watching people rush below, remembering what it felt like to be unseen. He started keeping a notebook, scribbling ideas, names of shelters, charities, and notes like, "Find Ravi something nice." He didn't want to forget where he'd come from. Money could fix a lot of things, but it couldn't erase the years he'd spent invisible. One afternoon, he returned to the cafe where the billionaire had mocked him. The same black car was parked out front, polished, perfect, the kind that seemed allergic to dirt. The billionaire was there again, surrounded by his usual circle of admirers. He laughed loudly, tossing his keys to the valet like he was throwing coins to peasants. John hesitated by the curb. Then he stepped forward, calm and steady. The billionaire looked up, his expression polite but puzzled. "Do I know you?" he asked. John smiled faintly. "You once told me to buy myself a dream." The man frowned, searching his memory. "Ah, I see. Well, looks like you finally did." He smirked. "Good for you." John nodded. It wasn't about luck. It was about not giving up, even when people stopped seeing me. The billionaire raised an eyebrow, shrugged, and turned back to his friends. But for a fleeting second, something in his eyes, a flicker of discomfort, gave John quiet satisfaction. He didn't need an apology. He'd already won something bigger than that. Later that evening, John sat by his window, sipping instant coffee, thinking about everything that had changed, and everything that hadn't. He still felt the same heartbeat, the same thoughts about the people sleeping under bridges, the same ache when he passed the park at night. He whispered to himself, "If I forget what this feels like, I'll lose more than money ever gave me." So he decided then, he'd give back. He didn't know how yet, but he would. He took a fresh page in his notebook and wrote one sentence in bold letters. "Hope is worth sharing." And under it, another, "Tomorrow, begin." Morning sunlight poured through the thin curtains of John's apartment, touching the edges of the small kitchen table where his notebook lay open. The words he'd written the night before stared back at him. Hope is worth sharing. He read them again, slowly, letting the meaning sink in. He'd spent years taking what little hope he could find. A warm coffee, a kind word, a quiet night under shelter. Now, for the first time, he had enough to give it away. He started small. He went back to the shelter that had given him warmth on freezing nights, the same one that had offered him a blanket when the rest of the city turned its back. The director, a woman named Gloria, barely recognized him. "John?" she said, blinking. "You look different." He smiled. "Clean clothes'll do that, and a little bit of luck." They sat down at the long wooden table where volunteers sorted donations. He handed her an envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "Funding," he said simply. "Enough to keep this place running for a while, and maybe open another one." Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a check for $50,000. "John, this could help so many people." "That's the idea," he said softly. "No one should sleep in the cold and feel forgotten." Word spread fast again, but this time the attention felt different. Not flashy, not sensational. Just genuine stories of a man who remembered where he came from. John didn't do interviews anymore. He said everything he needed to say through his actions. He started visiting soup kitchens, leaving envelopes behind when no one was looking. He paid for a food truck to deliver hot meals to the underpasses at night. And every time someone tried to thank him, he just smiled and said, "Pass it on." A month later, he met Ravi outside the convenience store. The old friend grinned wide as John handed him a small set of keys. "What's this?" Ravi asked. "A new store," John said. "Your own place. You helped me when you didn't have to. I figured it's time that kindness came full circle." Ravi's voice cracked. "John, you don't owe me anything." "I know," John said. "That's what makes it special." They hugged like brothers. For John, that moment meant more than any check, any number, any luxury. It was a piece of his soul being stitched back together. With time, John began thinking bigger. He met with city officials, nonprofits, and community organizers. He wanted to build something lasting, something that would outlive the headlines and the luck. So, with part of his winnings, he founded Second Chance Homes, a simple name for a simple dream, giving people who'd fallen through the cracks a way back up. Each home had a small kitchen, clean beds, and a rule carved above every door. Dignity first. John visited often, talking to the residents not like a donor, but like one of them. Because he was. He'd been where they were. Hungry, scared, invisible. One evening, a young man approached him outside one of the shelters. He was about 20, thin, eyes guarded. "You're the guy who won the lottery, right?" he asked. John smiled. "That's what they tell me." The young man hesitated. "I used to laugh at people like you. Then I lost everything. Guess life's got a sense of humor." John nodded. "It does, but it's got a heart too. You just have to listen for it." The young man's eyes softened. "You really think I can start over?" John placed a hand on his shoulder. "You're standing. That's a start." Months passed, and Second Chance Homes became more than a project. It became a movement. Volunteers joined, donations poured in, and new facilities opened across the city. For every person who walked through those doors, John saw a reflection of who he'd been. The billionaire's face occasionally flashed across his TV screen. Awards, charity galas, business ventures. But John didn't feel anger anymore. If anything, he felt pity. Money could build walls or bridges. The difference was how you used it. One quiet evening, John sat alone in his small office overlooking the city skyline. The hum of traffic below felt almost peaceful. He thought of all the nights he'd watched that same skyline from the street, wondering what it would be like to belong. Now he knew. Belonging wasn't about walls or wealth. It was about connection, about seeing others and being seen. He flipped open his notebook again. Under the last line, "Hope is worth sharing," he wrote a new one. "The richest man in the world is the one who remembers to give." That night, before he left, he walked past the small memorial plaque at the entrance of the shelter. It read, "For those who believed tomorrow could still be better." He smiled, whispered, "Thank you," and stepped out into the cool night. The same streets, the same sounds, but now they carried echoes of hope. And somewhere in the distance, the faint laughter of the city blended with something softer, the sound of lives beginning again. The city was quiet that morning. A soft rain had just ended, leaving the streets shining like glass. John stood by the window of his small apartment, the same one he'd chosen to keep even after the money came. He liked its simplicity, the chipped paint, the sound of the neighbor's radio playing old country songs. It reminded him that not everything needed to be new to be good. He poured himself a cup of coffee. Strong, black, honest. Outside, the city was waking up. Bus brakes squealing, vendors opening their carts, people rushing toward lives they hoped would matter. John smiled. "That's all any of us want," he whispered. for it to matter. He spent the morning at one of the second-chance homes visiting the residents. There was laughter in the hallways now, music even. People were cooking breakfast together, trading stories, making plans. It smelled like fresh coffee and second chances. A woman named Lila stopped him near the stairs. She had a job interview that day and looked nervous, twisting a borrowed necklace around her fingers. "What if they ask about my past?" she asked softly. John smiled. "Tell them it made you strong. Tell them you didn't quit when life told you to." She nodded, tears welling up. "You really think that's enough?" He placed a hand over his heart. "It's more than enough." As she walked away, he whispered, "Go make them see you." That evening, John took a walk through the park where he'd once slept. The bench was still there. The same cracked wood, the same crooked lamppost. But now, someone had left a bunch of wildflowers tied with a ribbon on it. A small note fluttered beneath. "Thank you, whoever you are. Your kindness found me when nothing else did." John sat down slowly, his throat tightening. He didn't know who left it, and it didn't matter. It was proof that kindness, once set loose, finds its way back. He looked up at the sky, the clouds breaking apart into streaks of gold. The same sky he used to talk to every morning. The same whisper left his lips again, but this time, it felt like an answer. Still here, still breathing. A few days later, he received an invitation, a charity gala downtown, hosted by the same billionaire who once mocked him. John almost laughed when he saw the name. He thought about ignoring it, but something in him said, "No, go." Not to gloat, to show how far grace could reach. That night he put on a simple black suit and walked into the ballroom. Crystal lights glimmered like stars above polished marble floors. The billionaire was there, surrounded by donors and cameras, his smile polished as ever. When their eyes met, the man hesitated, recognition flickering, pride wrestling with discomfort. "John Merrick," he said finally. "Quite the success story. You've come a long way," John smiled. "Guess we both have." The billionaire shifted, searching for something clever to say, but John spoke first. "You once told me to buy myself a dream," he said quietly. The billionaire blinked, remembering. John continued, "I did, but it wasn't with money. It was with faith. In people, in second chances, in the idea that anyone can start again." For once, the room around them went still. The billionaire said nothing, just nodded, faintly, eyes softer now. John extended his hand. "No hard feelings. Life taught us both something, I think." The man hesitated, then shook it. And in that brief moment, the arrogance, the pride, the divide between them, all of it dissolved like fog under morning sun. Weeks passed. John's work continued. Quiet, steady, unstoppable. He avoided fame, refused luxury. When reporters asked why, he simply said, "I already have what I need." One evening, he stood again by his window, watching the city glow under the fading light. In the distance, laughter drifted up from the street. Kids playing, a guitar strumming, life moving on. He opened his notebook for the last time. On the final page, beneath all the notes and scribbles, he wrote, "True wealth isn't what you keep. It's what you give, and who you become because of it." He closed the book gently, set it on the table, and smiled. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. Somewhere out there, another John was picking up a forgotten piece of paper. Another chance, another beginning, and if life had taught him anything, it was this. Sometimes the smallest things carry the biggest miracles.